Welcome to Eye Contact. I'm Paul Rosen, and today we're going to talk to Professor David Spalton, who gave the Hellenic Society Kelman lecture at the 23rd ESCRS Winter Meeting in Athens. David, welcome. Your Kelman lecture title was At Life Behind the Lens. What was the idea behind that?
Yes, well, it's interesting, Paul. I've always had an interest in posterior capsular pacification for many years, and I thought that I would use the lecture to bring people up to date with what's actually happening with the management of PCO these days. And
the lectures, that this is the Kelman lecture, and Charlie Kelman was, perhaps some say, a renegade as well as being a huge innovator. And the same could be said about Ridley, who was one of your predecessors at St Thomas's, and also Peter Choice, and they sort of bucked the trend. And I just wondered whether that spirit was still present in ophthalmology.
I don't think so to the same amount, Paul. Things were different in those days. These days, with ethics and regulation, I think there's always room for someone with a brilliant new idea and to do things differently. But I don't think anyone can do it in the same way that they did, which was really without any ethics consent or that sort of thing, really. Which is, I think, it's a good thing now. Things are better regulated, and that must be in the patient's interest.
But do you think they would have achieved today what they did 30 years ago?
No. I mean, I think you know, had Harold Ridley's first operation gone wrong, we might not be here now. But times were actually different then. Surgeons had an idea and they could try it out and experiment.
But nevertheless, I think there were many grateful patients from Ridley's work.
Yes, it was. Yes, absolutely. But we move on, and times are different.
Was the same said of Charlie Kelman? Was he considered in the same?
Yes, I think he was. I mean, I think he was obviously a great pioneer. It's very interesting. He was a different sort of personality. He was very much a showbiz figure and a very flamboyant sort of chap. And I think that helped him get the idea of phaco going and that sort of thing. But it still took over 20 years for phaco to become, I think he did his first phaco in 1967 with a phaco time of 79 minutes, I think, and the eye was enucleated 2 days later. You know, and he was vilified by his colleagues at the time, but it took 20 years, really, until the 1980s before phaco became accepted as the best way of doing operations, really.
But in part that was technology.
Yes, and the same with Harold Ridley. Yeah. Harold Ridley did his first implant in 1950, and once again it took 30 years for the technology to catch up with the idea. And
how much was that vilification protecting the patients, or was it professional jealousy, do you think?
Oh, I think a lot of it was actually jealousy. People were jealous of the idea. It was the era of the big personality, wasn't it? And I mean, Harold Ridley, for instance, I think his major fault was that he didn't bring Duke Elder in on it. Duke Elder was the major political figure of the time, and he marginalised Duke Elder, who then did everything he could to be difficult.
And what do you see as the sort of remaining challenges facing ophthalmology today?
I think it's very interesting. I'm always amazed that the ball keeps actually rolling on and the fertility of human imagination never stops. And you think, can the operation get any better? And of course it does, year by year, sometimes in small steps, sometimes in big steps. The major challenge, of course, is to get a truly accommodative lens. That's the holy grail. But then I think how we do the operation is going to change, and automation, robotic surgery is coming in, and I think we're going to see that taking an increasing role, while femto laser has been shown to be no better than the human hand. It's as good as the human hand for part of the operation, which is amazing when you think about it.
Going back to sort of accommodating lenses, how far down the path are we, do you think?
Well, I think there's two themes there. One is to put the lens in the bag, which seems to be the sensible idea to me. There's another school of thought of putting lenses into the sulcus, which we moved out of sulcus lenses 20 years ago, so that seems a bit of a retrograde step. The problem with accommodating lenses is that the the concepts are changing, and we're now moving on to a lens which changes its curvature to get accommodation rather than moves in the eye. So we're moving to change of curvature lenses with soft polymers and that sort of thing. The major problem with that, well, there are two problems really. One is to get a lens which is small enough to put in the eye through a reasonable incision. And the other thing is that the first requirement of an accommodative lens is, of course, to have good unaided distance vision. There's no point having accommodation if you have to wear spectacles to see anyway. And they're having quite a bit of difficulty sizing the capsular bag to hit emetropia. And I think that's a soluble problem, but it is still a problem there.
And this is something that's been experimented with for 20, 30 years, isn't it?
Yes, yes. But there are companies now, the amount of money and technology that's going into it, I think we're going to be seeing in the next 5 or 10 years proper accommodating lenses coming into clinical practice.
What about robotic surgery? I mean, we've got the femto, which is, you could say, is a robot, but it has to be driven by a human hand. What about truly autonomous robotic surgery?
Well, we have eye trackers at the moment. It's not too far-fetched to imagine possibly that you could combine femto and eye tracking with a sort of removal of a faker, remove the lens. I don't know. That's going to be some way away, isn't it? But
well, I hope so. So the human robot will still continue.
I mean, it's amazing the rate of progress. And you work in Oxford, and you've been doing some robotic retinal surgery there. So,
sure. Yeah.
So you know, we're seeing these things. I think the other really interesting thing that's happening is we're starting possibly to see signs of medical treatment of coming into cataract. There's a drop which can restore accommodation by breaking the disulfide bonds in the lens. That sounds quite an interesting concept, and there's been some very interesting work on dogs with cataracts where you can reverse the cataractus changes with a drug called lanosterol. I mean, how this comes out into human practice and what we don't know, but perhaps we're just sort of seeing the very earliest stages of some medical treatment for these things coming
So a lot of people watching will be wondering, how long have they got?
I think they're probably okay for a while, but you know, it's amazing. When you think back the changes that have happened in the last 20 or 30 years, I mean, I started off doing intracapsular cataract surgery with a cryoprobe. You took the lens out, the vitreous tended to follow with a sort of 8 or 10 millimeter incision. Intraocular lenses were totally banned at the time. And look where we are now. It's amazing how things change. And the only thing which is certain, of course, is that it's going to change.
Yeah. So we talked about medical challenges. What about your own personal challenges?
Well, that's interesting. It's a difficult question, Paul. I've reached the time of life where I can do the things that I want to do, which is rather nice. I've got some interest. We're hopefully starting a new research project looking at depth of focus with monofocal lenses in the next few months. So there's some research going on there. I've got some other ideas that I'd like to have time to explore. So there's that side of things going on, and ophthalmology has been my work and my hobby, really. Yeah.
No, you've done it phenomenally well, and congratulations on the award this meeting. Yes. David, thanks very much for taking the time to come and talk to us.
Thank you very much.
For more information on this and related topics, please visit us at eurotimes.org. Thank you.